there. Okay. Family's good. Everyone's good.
Everyone's good. Yeah, I'm so happy that we are getting nicer weather.
Oh, I
That's
know. It was depressing for a little while.
so depressing.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. All right. All right, welcome to Keeping It Real, the largest podcast made by real estate agents and for real estate agents. My name's DJ Paris. I am your guide and host through the show. And today is our monthly series called the Monday Market Minute with Carrie McCormick from the Carrie McCormick Real Estate Group with At Properties here in Chicago. Carrie is a top 1% producer in Chicago. She has over 20 years of experience helping buyers, sellers, and investors. And I can brag for Carrie. She would never say this herself, but she was actually one of the very top producing Chicago agents for the first quarter of this year. She was technically number 2, but I would say she was really number 1 because the number 1 was a developer, not like a traditional agent. So traditional agent, she was number 1. That's how amazing she is. She's a true superstar, an expert in everything from first-time home buyers, veteran investors, and luxury properties. She also works with a lot of developers and is often chosen to represent their high-end developments. I actually live in one of Carrie's developments, and I could not be happier to have learned about it because this is now where I live and I love it so much. And anyone who's worked with Carrie has that same feeling. So please visit Carrie at her website, carriemccormickre.com. But most importantly, follow her on Instagram. She does it all herself, which is even more insane. And it's so amazing, her Instagram. It's really a great place to look to see what other realtors are doing and having success. Her Instagram is Carrie McCormick Real Estate. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. Carrie, welcome.
Thank you so much. I love that intro. Reminds me of all my hard work. So thank you.
Well, I love you because I live somewhere because of you. And I'm so grateful that you had been like, you should come check out this thing a few years, 3 or 4 years ago. And I did. And I was like, okay. And that was it. So, all right. So what's going on this month?
So let's talk about building your business and building a brand. We are in 2024. As DJ mentioned, I've been a broker for over 20 years. It's been a long journey. I think one comment a lot of new brokers or brokers that have been in the business for a few years, they do ask, and I love the question is, how did you do it? How did you build your brand? How did you become successful? And I will tell you, it took a lot of patience and it took a lot of hard work. Again, a few years ago, 10 years ago, no one knew my name, so it's taken this long to do what I've done and to build it. Not that I'm saying it's going to take anyone this long, but for me, it did. So I wanted just to talk a little bit about how I started in the business and how I got here. So I'm going to speed play, 20 years for everyone to listen. And just really quick, kind of off the cuff, is I just got back from Palm Beach. I just got back from Dallas. I'm headed to New York. I've been traveling so much to meet with other brokers in other markets, just to sit down and talk. Happy to do that with any of the listeners. If you want to get your office together, whether you come to Chicago or I travel to your office, I love sharing my stories. I love sharing my expertise. So happy to do that, or, contact me and maybe I'm going to be traveling in your city next. So would love to meet anyone out there. But just to talk about where I started. So I was in corporate America before I was in real estate. And from a very young age, my mother always told me I was a very rebel-spirited child. Never wanted to follow the rules, never wanted to stay in the box. So being in corporate world just wasn't my thing. I was great at my job. I worked in the .com era, which was a phenomenal time of my life. But again, being in the office at 8 a.m., making 150 phone calls or whatever they told me to do, I really just wanted to do the opposite. So one day on a fluke, I was out walking. And again, I'm here in Chicago, so I was at the Aon Centers where my office was, and I walked all the way to the West Loop, which was a very hefty and long walk at the time. I stumbled upon a construction site where I proceeded to ask the construction workers what they were doing, what were they building. I was a nuisance on the site. The manager came out and, kindly asked me to exit the site. And we started talking, and he told me, we're building I asked him what they're doing there. He said, we're building a new construction condo building. And I told him, no one is going to live here. Why would you build a building in this neighborhood? This is a terrible neighborhood. And he was intrigued by my, I don't know, my passion about my thought process. And I sat with him for just a few minutes, told him, what my thoughts were. He asked me to meet him in his office the following week because he wanted to hear more of what I thought about this. And I think I was probably the perfect demographic at the time for the building. So I did meet with him the following week. He was a real estate developer and he hired me. So that day I quit my corporate job and I went into real estate. And everybody knows, it's a non-paying job until you close something. So,
Right.
but what I did is I knew in my heart, and it wasn't that I was so passionate about real estate, but I knew in my heart that, the corporate world wasn't for me. I knew I was an entrepreneur at heart. I knew my hard work. I knew I could do it. So I trusted my gut and I went for it. So, you know, fast forward all of these years, again, for the first 10 years of my career, I was in development. So I worked for some of the largest developers, successful career in the development world here in Chicago. When the market crashed, development obviously wasn't doing well. Brokerage in general wasn't doing well, but I pivoted my career and I went into general brokerage. That's when I thought I need to start building a business. And I looked at it from a business aspect. One quick story that I like to tell people, which was a huge learning curve for me, and this goes back about, I don't know, was it 5 or 7 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I can't recall, but I went into a listing appointment. And I know I was the fifth broker for this listing appointment because it was like every 30 minutes they had a broker and we were all happened to be in the lobby waiting for our turn. So I go up, and again, I know I'm the last broker, and I know that there's probably no chance because I saw the other brokers coming out of this appointment, and they had bigger businesses than I did. So I knock on the door, the husband answers, and he said, let me guess, you're the number one broker here in Chicago. You sold, blah, blah, blah of real estate, and you did this and you did this. He's like, come on in. And I'm like, okay. And I said, well, to be honest, sir, I am not the number one broker and I'm number three and I have not sold that much real estate. But what I wanted to do, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is talk to you about your home and what I can do for you. And let's talk about you. And he looked at me, he goes, you're hired. And it just dawned on me, and it was a very organic conversation. And I thought, when I told him I was number three, or I didn't sell hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate at the time, that he was just going to show me the door. But and again, this seems so easy, but I put the client first. And again, everyone knows that, but there's a difference between knowing and doing, right? When you really come from a place of authentically putting the client's needs first, not the money, not your time, but really the client. We are a fiduciary. The client feels that and they know that, right? Also in that appointment, what I learned was being prepared and having the knowledge of the market, right? I can't underestimate having knowledge and knowing the market inside and out, because in this day and age, all of our clients know what the market's doing. There's Zillow, there's, every website out there, they can research everything, and it is our job to know that as well going in. So I would always say be extremely prepared on the market, but more importantly, be prepared on who your client is. Because I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but I'm an excellent listener during my presentations or when I'm with clients, because again, it's their time, it's about them. But knowing a little bit about the client coming into the appointment, there's so much research we can do, LinkedIn, I mean, everything. right? You can Google the person. Are they an analytical person? What type of personality do they have? If I know I'm going into an appointment with someone who's in the financial world that's very data driven, I will bring an Excel spreadsheet. I'm bringing charts. I know how to impress that person. If they're not, if they're an interior designer and they're very creative, I know that pictures are going to say 1,000 words, right? So knowing that before you go into your appointment, knowing a little bit about that client is going to win you that business. Again, sellers want to do business with people that they trust, one that they know, and that know that have their best interest at heart. I know that that was a rambling story that I told you, but I think what I'm trying to get across is that it's obviously always hard work, but it's putting in the time, putting in the energy, knowing your clients and knowing your market.
Yeah, I love all of that. A couple of things that stuck out to me. One was I was thinking about why do sometimes like listing presentation, why does that sometimes not win the business if it's not also accompanied by a lot of listening and a lot of questions? Then it's just a presentation, right? And you
Right,
were talking about when you sat down and won that listing that you were the fifth person and you were like, just let's talk about you and what do you guys want, versus launching straight into here's why I'm the person to hire. i
right,
think i think people want to be heard and they want to feel validated and they want really somebody that's like, I can come up with a solution for you, tell me what you're looking for. And
right,
that's essentially what you did. And I think the challenge with that for a lot of our listeners is it's a little scary to ask a consumer, like, what are you looking for? Because then we have to take that information in, we have to somehow process it in real time, and then possibly try to come up with an answer right then and there. Or we have to have I'm going to take this back to my office, I'm going to think about this, I'm going to come to you with a solution. But you
right,
have to sort of have that ready to go, because they are going to ask a question where you might not have a ready answer. And so I think that's probably why a lot of times in listing presentations, people stick to their presentation because they don't have as much unknown. But I love the idea of coming in and basically also having a presentation, but having, like, hey, I really want to get to know you, and then I'll come to you with a solution.
right,
So I think there's something about asking questions. Can be a little scary, because if they answer in a way that you're like, I don't know what that means, then you have to sort of figure out how to proceed from there. But that's, I think, what good agents do is they listen, like you were saying. So I think and I also just love the idea that how you really built your career working with developers is you walked into a developer and you had an opinion. That's, to
uh-huh,
me, the really interesting part. Is anybody can walk up and say, hi, I'm so and so, I'd love to represent you, which, by the way, is an amazing thing to do in and of itself. But then to say, like, I don't think this is a good idea, and here's why, is a very courageous thing to do to a developer, I
yeah,
think. But it's also probably really important because a developer does want to hear, what do professionals think about what I'm doing? And I just love people that are willing to state opinions, because that's when I'm hiring a professional like an accountant or an attorney or whoever, I want opinions. I'm like, what should I be doing here?
right.
How does this work? I don't want to do all the legwork. And so I love the fact that you were able to bring another perspective. And then he was like, all right, let's work together, which is
That
incredible.
also brings up a good point, and this is, I think, important for everyone to hear this as well, is, it took me a while to figure out who I was as a real estate agent, right? So when I had started, we'll call it not in the development world, but in the general brokerage, I never had a mentor. And I don't recommend that, but just by default, I just never did. And I don't know why I didn't have one, but it was a lot of self-taught and a lot of self-learning. But what I did do is, I would look at some of the brokers that were ultra successful and just try to mimic what they were doing. And there was a point where I realized, so and so, it produces $100 million, and I'm watching everything they're doing and going to their open houses and seeing it, but it wasn't working for me. And I'm like, why is this not working? I'm doing the same thing or almost the same thing. And what I realized, again, this sounds simple, but this was my journey, was that wasn't me. I was not being authentic to who I was and what value I bring and, the way I speak and the way I do things. So there was a point where I'm like, you know what? This is who I am. This is how I envision my business. This is how I want to treat my clients. This is how I want to advertise. This is what I want to do. And I created a business being more authentic to myself. And that's where it skyrocketed. Because when I went in to talk to someone, it wasn't a canned answer. It wasn't, like you said, the presentation of A, B, C, and D. It was a conversation. And it was my experiences and truly how I felt about everything. And again, whether it's building your brand, doing your advertising, speaking, whatever it is, be authentic. And that's when people are going to see and trust you because you are you. No one else can be you except for you.
Right. And you also, too, you take chances. You took a chance walking up to that developer, right away. You took a chance in a story. I won't give the specifics, but basically you had a deal that went away and at the last minute. And then you walked next door to a property that was almost identical. And you were representing the seller at the previous thing. And then you're like, and there was an agent representing the buyer, and that was not you. And you walked next door to a seller and said, hey, they were going to buy your neighbor's home. It fell apart. Would you be interested in selling? Because I've got a buyer lined up.
Yep.
And then the deal closed. And that
Yep.
was just because you were like, I'm going to go walk next door. They didn't know you. They didn't know anything about you. They weren't looking to sell their home. And yet, so I love the fact that you are always thinking creatively as well. Like, how can I get this done? Which I think, speaks to your success, of course. Just so that, because I know Carrie has a very legendary status here in Chicago. Everyone just really is so impressed with her abilities. But I would love just to humanize you for a moment. Where do you struggle in your business? Because we just want to make sure not everything is perfect, so we can relate better to you.
Oh, nothing's ever perfect. I think that's what keeps me going and driving because, there's always ways to do things better. I would really just say time.
Yeah.
It's really something that I struggle with every day is, having enough time, talk to my clients, to, curate my marketing, to, get new business. So, time is a hard one, but I would say delegating as well has always been difficult for me. I'm always a doer. I know how to do this job from beginning to end. I know how to do paperwork. I know everything. I shouldn't say that sounded bad. Not that I know everything, but I know every attribute of this job. I've done it. And so because of that too, if something comes up, I'm like, I'll just do it myself, whether it's paperwork or inspection stuff or, changing light bulbs, I'm a doer, but I need to learn to delegate a little bit more on some of those tasks. And I have a hard time doing that.
Delegating's tough because you know exactly how you like something done and it meets your standard. And then to find somebody who has a similar standard is tough. It's just tough. And also too, you're putting a lot of faith in their abilities. Otherwise you're micromanaging everything they do.
Yes.
So I totally get it because my boss had said this to me many years ago. He goes, if you have something you're delegating to, you almost have to be okay with it only being about 70% to your liking. In other words, like people are probably just not going to do it the way you do it. And that's hard
It's
to
very
then,
hard.
yeah. So you have a similar
Yeah.
issue as, yes.
But
It's tough.
created this wonderful checklist. It's from the time I get a listing till the time we launch it, and then from launching to closing, kind of like a step-by-step guide, so that it's probably 200 steps long, which is ridiculous, but it kind of ensures that, we have a smooth process. So I'm probably borderline micromanager, but it's just my personality.
Well, it's you treat your business so you take it so seriously that it's important. Every step of that way is important because if something breaks down, one of those steps break down, it could torch the whole thing. So I totally get it. Have you had experiences, and I know you have somebody that helps you, but have you had experience working with like a transaction coordinator that does all of the, here's the timeline of what we're looking at as far as, important events in a transaction? Have you ever used any of those services, just out of curiosity, or do you
Well,
do everything?
I have in the past, but I've hired my own team. So I've
Yeah,
got, yeah, because it's all in-house, so I can control quality control.
sure. Sure. Yeah, I think some of these transaction coordinators, especially for agents that it's not their strong suit, I think you can find good ones out there. They're not always easy to find, but for like $300 or $400 or whatever they charge for, it seems like that would be a good use of time for an agent that's trying to handle all of those things at once. Because I think it's true. Like we're not all good at everything. We can't be good at everything. So
Right.
I love that stuff. One other question is, when there's market conditions that aren't favorable, so we still are in slightly higher interest rates than we'd like, and well, maybe more than slightly, and inventory is still not ideal.
Mhm.
Um, how do you stay positive when there's some real challenges out there?
I'm always a glass half full gal. I'm very solution oriented as well. Um, I mean, we can't change the interest rates. It is what it is, right? So it's just being educated on that conversation and, giving the client a good solution, whether it's the right lender or if they're going to leverage their portfolio. We can't control that, but just again, being educated on it and letting the clients know. Inventory, I'm always creative in finding inventory.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine there's times where well, we just talked about an example where you went up to a
Mhm.
seller who didn't even know they wanted to sell or
Yeah.
weren't, and you've probably done that a number of times. I think when agents start playing in the high net worth space or the true luxury space, getting a listing isn't really the guarantee for a sale anymore, because anybody can throw that on the MLS. And if it's a $5 million property or something, really sizable, there's just not that many people waiting for a $5 million property to hit the MLS. So oftentimes the listing agent, you have to kind of go out and find the buyer as well, I
Right.
imagine. And so how would you do that if you had an ultra high net worth listing, which I know you've had, and you're like, okay, well, putting on the MLS isn't really going to do much, because I need to go out and somehow market this property to people that might
Mhm.
actually be interested in buying it. Like, can you just walk through just general ideas of how people may want to? Because now, if on the buy side, things might be changing with compensation, and people are a little scared about that. It's going to be interesting to see listing agents if they are if they start looking for buyers directly. I hope that doesn't happen, but I know it on the high net worth side it sort of does happen
Yeah.
because there just aren't that many people. Yeah,
So I would say it's my network, and creating a network, and which with everything online, it's pretty easy to build an incredible network. And I would say going back again um, to younger agents or agents just starting the business is to start creating a great network. Whether it's art dealers or wealth managers or CPAs, price properties, those are the people you want to partner with, and you want to be able to pick up the phone and call them and say, I've got a $5 million listing. Do you have any clients that this would fit? So it's a lot more, we'll call it like legwork, right? It's going back to some of the grassroots marketing. So to me, it's all about networking and picking up the phone and reaching out to people.
and if you didn't know who those agents were who also play in that space, if you're like newer to that space, I guess you could go on the MLS, see what kind of transactions have closed in that space, and reach out to those agents, be like, hey, I got this new listing, I know you work with people like this. I imagine you've made those types of calls
Yeah,
all throughout your career.
absolutely.
Speaking of that, we've talked about this before, but just in case anyone's new, I just think this is such a great idea. You have obviously been in the industry long enough where people enter your local market, leave your local market, they retire elsewhere, they buy homes, they move. And so your professional network of realtors that you refer to and from obviously is really important because of your reputation. So you have gone out this last year, and I think you're still doing it now, and meeting, physically traveling to these areas where you know that a lot of your people retire to or move to. And instead of just throwing a referral over, knowing, well, I think they're pretty good, I know, from what you want to actually go and meet with them and
I
see
do.
how they interact. And can you tell us a little bit about how that's been helpful to you?
Oh, face-to-face meetings and getting to know people is so much different than just a phone call, right? It just, again, we build trust and relationships with our clients. We have to with our brokers, right? So to me, it shows also commitment to excellence and to how hard we work, So again, when, like in Dallas, I've known these ladies down there and we've talked, and I said, you know what, I'll be there on Tuesday at 2. And, just like the reaction of like, they're like, oh my God, that's so nice that you're coming.
Yeah.
Well, it's important to me. Right. And so it shows the importance of the relationship. So, and plus it gets me out of cold Chicago sometimes, more importantly.
Yeah, perfect. And I'll just ask this one last question. So, in for your business this year, is there one, aside from the production and the volume and all of that, what you want to do, is there any part of your process that you're looking to improve this year? Like, is there something going on that you're like, I need to make that a little bit easier or more
Yes.
efficient?
Yes. And there's always something, just so that
Yeah.
I'm never complacent with any process. It's always room to improve. But I would say communication, um, you know, there was someone had made this comment once and it always stuck with me. And they said that, um, like if you have a significant other, you get up in the morning, you leave for work, and maybe during the day you think about your significant other, or you're just wondering what they're doing, but you just don't communicate, and you get home late at night, you're grouchy, you go to bed, you wake up the next morning, the day starts again, but you think about your significant other, but you just don't say anything. They
Yeah.
said that's how your clients feel. Yes, you think about the client and the property all the time, but unless you communicate with them and say something, they don't know you're thinking about them.
It's a
They
great
don't
point.
know. So, it's again, sometimes, and that goes back to time. Sometimes I just don't have time in the day, and it becomes 9 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh shoot, I meant to call XYZ, but now it's 9 o'clock at night. So I
Yeah.
send an email, which I think is a little less personal, but um, so just a better way to communicate, and I think that's a big thing in any business that you're in.
Yeah, communication seems to be the number one reason why people stop working with an agent.
Yeah.
So I couldn't agree more. And again, back to like the significant other example. I've had this happen. It's really a great example because I've had it happen where I think about I don't have a significant other at the moment, but when I have had one, I think about that person a lot. And you're right, I don't often tell them I'm thinking about them. And then all of a sudden, some time goes by and they're like, you don't really talk to me as much. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm talking to you all day. Right. And same
Yes.
thing with clients, right? In my mind,
Yes.
I'm thinking about my client all day. And yet, so what I do this with my friends too. I have a to-do system. I use Todoist, and I put regular communication, recurring events. So like all my friends are on a regular, they don't know this, but they're on a regular phone call schedule where for me, it's like I don't go more than 2 months without calling certain people, or 1 month or whatever. If it's my parents, every week,
Mhm.
whatever. So I think that can be done for clients as well. Like just putting it on the to-do list so that you're not just thinking about it. You're like, oh, tick off this I did it thing. So that's what I've done. But yeah, it's tough. It's a tough thing. But I will say, I have interviewed a lot of successful agents for the show, and a lot of them talk about just calling their client once a week being like a huge step up from previous experiences they've had with realtors. Like even just that alone it's like almost shocking that seems like a pretty low bar to clear, but that's, kind of what's neat about this industry is not everyone's super professional. And so you can really go in and give somebody a great experience just by staying in touch.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a great place to wrap up, Carrie. This was really super helpful. People always ask me, how come you don't ask Carrie questions about her business? And I go, you know what? I'm going to start doing that because people are so enamored with you. If everyone should be enamored with Carrie, please follow her on Instagram. She does all of her own social media, which is even the more impressive with how busy she is. Carrie McCormick Real Estate is where you go find her. CarrieMcCormickRE.com is her website, also a beautiful website. And if you think you would like to be partnered with Carrie, maybe for a transaction, somebody's moving to the Chicagoland area or away from the Chicagoland area, and you would like to maybe be one of the people that Carrie refers business to, you can certainly reach out to her. Carrie, what's the best way someone should reach you?
Always call me, 312-961-4612. You can email me, you can Google me, you can DM me, you can text me, you can do whatever you want. I will answer.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank everyone for sticking around to the end of this episode. Carrie, as usual, thank you on behalf of the audience. You provided a ton of value today. On behalf of Carrie and myself, thank you to the audience. By the way, this isn't really going to matter to anyone but me, but we had the most number of live viewers watching as we were recording than we've ever had in our entire history today. So we had about 100 people watching live, and we don't even really promote it live. So that's even more incredible. Shows how popular Carrie is here on the show. So on behalf of everyone, please tell a friend. Think of another agent that could benefit from hearing this great conversation with Carrie. Shoot them a link and hit the like and subscribe button wherever you are listening or watching us on. We appreciate it. Leave us a review. Check out our sponsors, and we will see everybody on the next episode. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.